Okay, so hello and thank you to everybody for joining us for today's session. We're here today to explore why businesses should consider going headless. I'm Joanna Hinchliffe, I'm a growth partner at Kin+Carta, and with me today we have Christy Cleveland-Callahan, who is Senior Product Manager at Freeletics. We have Gal Oppenheimer, who is Solution Architect at Content Stack, and we have Martin Patton, who is the CTO at Kin+Carta. As we go through the session today, we will have time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to flag up any questions that you may have through the chat conversation piece, and then we'll try and answer as many as we can as we get to the end of the session. So let's start with the growth of Headless. And Christy, I wondered if you wouldn't mind kicking off, thinking about your views as to why Headless is kind of no longer in the domain of the digital native and early adopter.
Yeah, thank you for asking a really great question, Joanna. So I really think that the old technology no longer supports the realities of the market that we all know and work in. So originally, when a lot of these CMSs were built, you had one distribution channel and that was your website. And you could send out that URL and all of your audience would just flock to it. And that was where you would communicate with them. And then as the market has grown, we now have a distribution of channels, and we have all sorts of different requirements for participating in those channels. And our audiences become incredibly diverse, and their behavior is different depending on which channel they're in. And your traditional CMS doesn't support that. It's really difficult to publish to all those channels. And in order to really communicate with the growing audiences, you need to go to each of those channels. You can't really pull them into you anymore. So you need technology that works with you and helps you go to where your audiences are and helps you spin up all of these distribution channels really quickly and efficiently and in a cost-effective manner. So I think that's really why you've seen the growth of a headless CMS as a solution for content distribution. You're still on mute, Joanna.
Who hasn't heard that for the millionth time today in a Zoom call? Martin, let's go to you. So thinking about Headless's strengths, how do you feel they play out in terms of operational and cost efficiencies?
Yeah, sure. So I think the main win is the speed. So with Content Stack, you can create content types, you can connect to the APIs and be pretty much using it within minutes. If you've got more coupled platforms such as DXPs, this can mean kind of a code change, a deployment for even like really simple field updates. So companies using more monolithic platforms typically also can't leverage the benefits of continuous integration, continuous deployment in those operations. So they have to have proprietary deployment approaches. Or there's just too much risk because of the other functionality that they build into that CMS that has to be kind of regression tested. So what that means in reality is it's kind of weeks before marketing can take advantage of those updates. So just on that in a bit more detail, I think kind of the lack of WYSIWYG and things like that was often cited as a reason to not go headless because it's too difficult for non-technical users. I really think that's changed now. So for a start, the teams have matured digitally, embracing a more agile marketing approach and general business approach. And they can see the benefits of not having to pay IT to implement things like WYSIWYG, which sort of creates a whole new cost center. And WYSIWYG from sort of that area of web authoring where you just publish into a single web channel. And I think we all know there's far more important challenges now. So the omni-channel, there's accessibility. A lot of the content now is being designed for machine consumption. So many channels out there that getting that content well structured, published out is far more important. So as long as you can set a layout, some styles, you let the dev teams control that, that's their kind of domain. And you've got so many automated tools now that can help you to plug into the sort of marketing workflow, help you preview that content, check the accessibility. Don't see that as a kind of a valid sort of argument against moving to a headless approach anymore. So I think you see where some of that cost saving comes in, but on sort of the analysis against DXP and that TCO. So a lot of companies will buy a DXP, a full one, and end up using 20% of it. Or they find out it's not what they need and then kind of divest away from the DXP core capabilities, integrate with the other best-in-class tools. We see that all the time. So because DXPs are kind of the approximation of the average, they're never out of the box, and then you're stuck in that upgrade decay cycle. So essentially, you've kind of run to a point you have to upgrade the CMS. Often, you're doing it to retain support, not that you're going to use any of the features, and you get a lot of technical debt built up. So in summary, I'd say that headless approach, and a Mac approach, which is more of the architectural style we're seeing now in these modern systems, is you're actually reducing the long-term TCO. You're buying just enough of the systems that you need that return the most value to the business, and you get those nice side effects of not having that opportunity cost because it's all SaaS. You have to keep it up to date. The vendor will do that for you. And just to end with, there's a nice sustainability angle as well. So you can generate static sites for static content and deploy straight to cloud CDNs. You can use serverless techniques. So actually that helps you, be carbon negative, carbon neutral, use just the right resources that you need on demand, rather than have that heavy platform sat there running 24 hours a day on sort of fixed infrastructure and just consuming kind of electricity.
Okay, comprehensive. Gal, from the perspective of a headless provider, what do you feel Content Stack bring that addresses those opportunities that Christy and Martin have just discussed?
Yeah, so I think what Headless CMS brings in general is it gives an ideal development environment for the development team first. And so if you look at where they can create what they want to, they really have everything in the world that can be built today. So anything that can technically be built using HTML, CSS, or if you're building an iOS or an Android application, can be done by a developer. You're not limited by specific frameworks or environments or solutions or technologies that your CMS provider is creating, because you control the full delivery experience. And what Content Stack brings to the table and how we differentiate from other headless providers is, in addition to giving developers everything they need, we also give an amazing user experience for content creators. So as Martin said, it's not just about being able to build like an amazing static site that runs quickly and provides a great experience, but actually making it so it's so easy that content creators can update that static site in minutes or seconds without relying on the engineering team. It's really the first time where you're giving full control to the content team to make any changes they want to make. And then the other advantage is, because of the speed and the simplicity with which you're building these, you don't need to plan everything up front, and you can actually make changes once you're working on the project. So let's say you're a year or 2 years into a project and you decide you want to remove a technology and bring something else in. You can actually do that very seamlessly, even without actually impacting your content editors. So we've had customers where they've moved from one video provider to another video provider, and they had a 1 hour content freeze for their content team totally in order to move the entire platform. And the experience was so seamless that there was no training needed to tell the content team what to do now, because the actual experience to them was exactly the same. The buttons all said the same things. They were in the same locations. Just behind the scenes, a different piece of technology was being used to deliver the videos on a certain day.
Okay, great.
And like to just build on what Gal said, that's exactly the experience that we've had at Freeletics. So when we set out to implement Content Stack, we set metrics to understand how successful we were being. And two of the three were productivity and then our end-to-end cycle time. So for our productivity, when we implemented Content Stack and started working and really focusing on utilizing headless CMS technology, we increased productivity by 60%. By freeing up engineers and freeing up our marketing team to work how they really should, rather than how they were before. And then our end-to-end cycle time, we decreased by 80%. So we literally went from 20 days to do some bespoke dev work down to shipping content within hours for whatever our marketing team needed. And it's been an incredible game changer for us.
Great, thanks, Christy.
Awesome.
I think given what we've heard from the three of you so far, and this one's back to you, Gal, how do those benefits exemplify themselves on a day-to-day basis so that, as Christy's just mentioned there, businesses can actually drive performance improvement and growth?
Yeah, let me show you. If you can pause sharing screen, perfect. I can share my screen. Awesome. So we have a fun little application built for you guys. You should see some creamy veggie fondue. It's all about food and wine, two of my favorite things. And so what we have here, it's a really interesting homepage. So you have a banner up here, some image text content, an embedded video, a recipe, a link to sort of a landing page with more content and wine pairings. All of this can be managed in Content Stack. So I can click on the edit button to jump straight into the page in the CMS. And what you see here, this is actually one of my favorite features in the platform. It's called modular blocks. And what it does, it breaks all of those elements out into different building blocks. And so I can really easily, so I want to say, I want to bring this section, I can drag this up higher if I want to, or I can go and add a new section. So like, let's say I want to add this stack column. I have some food content right over here. Let me pull it in. And so I can very quickly create the content here. So I'll put in the title, add in a subtitle. Let's pick an image. We have some images already uploaded in here. Can grab the soup right over here and then add finally a little bit more content. And we can put, oh, I did not want to copy all of that. Let me make that look less formatted. Because you can tell it's a real demo and things don't work the way you want to. Yeah. Perfect. And let's just add a couple more things. We'll drop that. We'll work without it today. And so now when I finish adding these pieces in, I can save the content and I'll see in the background, the page automatically refreshes itself. I come in here and I can see my new soup right over here. What you'll notice is these are both aligned very similarly. And in fact, like the text here is auto-capitalized. So you can actually very easily control these things. So instead of having to have very strict instructions in the CMS to tell users to like automatically capitalize this, you can just take care of that in your front end. And if you saw these were both right aligned, so I can flip this and make this left aligned, so the text is different, and I can give it like a different fading experience. I can have it fade from the left, for example, if I want to. So we'll save this in, we'll go back to the top of the page. Let's refresh it. And now as I load in, I can see this one came in from the left, this one came in from the right. It gives that very different experience. And you saw how easy it was for me without writing any lines of code, without going into the HTML. I can make this, and I have, when you look at this, I have it's 8, 9 different examples of what I can do just for a fading experience. So it gives content creators a really creative experience building pages without having to go talk to engineering or try and move things around and then test it on 15 devices. It just works out of the box.
Great.
Awesome. So let's move on to the next piece. I'm going to show you guys a little bit some cool stuff built in for personalization and A/B testing. So what we are going to do is we are going to search for some wine. I have here, we actually have a barcode scanner built in. So I could, if I was on my cell phone, I could actually scan a bottle of wine live and pull the wine. But just to save some time, I'll drop in a barcode here from one of my favorite wines. And you can see it's giving me recommended wines, recommended food based on the wine I've selected. And I can go in, I can look for different complexities of food. I can look based on cook time. We even have allergies built in. So I can go in and let's say I am allergic to milk. It'll automatically filter down to what I want to do. It's a really cool experience. All of this is managed from Content Stack. And what we've also built into this is actually personalization and segmentation. So we've connected in with one of our partners, Dynamic Yield, to support this. And so in Dynamic Yield, we've set up 3 different personas. So the first one would be a hipster. If you look at this at their data right over here, they like medium and complex recipes with a cook time of 30 to 60 minutes. If I look at, say, the working mom, you can imagine there's probably either an infant in one arm or a kid crying and screaming in the background. So they want easy recipes that take 0 to 30 minutes to take a look at. Or if you're looking at sort of someone who likes to do traditional cooking, they don't really care about the complexity, but they do care about the cook time. They want sort of those longer roasts that take a long time to cook together. And so as a user is coming into the CMS, dynamic yield would be automatically identifying what kind of user they are and actually tracking what's going on. Just to make it easy for demo purpose, I have a quick switcher right here so I can take a look. Let's say I'm a hipster. You can see it automatically filters in the medium and complex experiences in 30/60. Or if I'm a working mom, it brings in easy recipes under 30 minutes. So all of these things come together to give you a great experience for the content team. And then of course you want all of this data analyzed, stored back into dynamic yield. And where possible, we actually want to bring your analytics data into your CMS. So for example, if I'm looking at the wine page, let's say I'm looking at this wine over here. You can see that when I add content to my cart, we actually have an event being tracked into Google Analytics. So let me click on the edit button over here just so I can jump to my wine page in the CMS. And so we have a content widget looking at analytics, and it's pulling data live from Google Analytics, looking at sort of goal completion and the conversion rate, as well as other data points. These are really easy to integrate into the CMS. In a moment, I'll actually show you how to build a new integration in as well. All of this coming in from the page to deliver the content to the user.
You trying to join us, Christy?
Yep.
No, oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, thank you. Like Gal said, nothing works like as planned when you're live. No, so yeah, this is once again, this is like the same experience that we have had at Freeletics. And it literally is this fast. You know, we really do have all of these optimizations in place that allow us to work this quickly in publishing. And our marketing team can spin up what they need, whether it's they have an idea to experiment right now, or they have, you know, planned experiments down the road. They go in, they set them up days, weeks ahead of time, and then you just schedule them to launch. And it's so easy for them. And it just allows them to move so quickly. And the results that we've seen are so cool. So I'm sorry, I'm just gushing because like the transformation that this has brought about has been incredible for our company. And if you have a heavy CMS, these are things that you can't do. Like there was no way we could have done this when like our PR site was on WordPress. We could not have responded this way. As easy as WordPress was to use, we were not functioning as quickly as this.
Thanks, Christy.
Awesome. And the last thing I'm going to show you guys, so we were talking about what would be cool to show you how quickly you can work in Content Stack. And I figured let's actually build an integration together live on this call. So you can see here, I went back to this page. If you look, there's no pricing information. I don't have commerce integrated. If I try and add it to my cart, you can see it actually got added at $0 because the connection has not been made. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to build live on the call an integration with Commerce Tools, which is the commerce engine behind the site. So let me go over here. We're going to download the Commerce Tools code as a zip file. We'll unzip it, drag it over to my other screen. And so there's two pieces. There's the HTML code for the integration. So I'm going to open this Visual Studio Code. So we're going to copy this over. We're going to go back into Content Stack. And so all our integrations are built here under extensions. We're going to create a new extension. And you can see there's 3 different types of integrations. So custom fields, that is what we're going to build now, the connection with Commerce Tools. Custom widgets is what I use to show you the integration with Google Analytics that we saw earlier for the reporting. And then dashboard widgets, we're not going to show you today, but it's really cool to bring in sort of custom home pages or applications across your whole site into the system. So we're going to create a custom field. Let's call this Commerce Tools. I'll save my data down as a JSON object, and you can host your integrations externally. So let's say you wanted to connect with something behind your firewall or need a lot of processing power. You can just provide a URL to Content Stack, or I can actually host the integration in the CMS. So I'll paste this right in here. And then I want to add my configuration data just to connect to the correct instance of Commerce Tools. So I'll come right over here, drop that down here. One thing that's really interesting to note, this entire integration is just 54 lines of code. It's not a very complicated integration to pull in and link the data. So I'll save this down in Content Stack. And now we'll go back to my main content page. and I'm going to edit the content structure. So we're going to go here and edit the actual content type. So this is the content model behind the product section, which is where all our wine is stored. I'm going to go in and drag over what's called a custom field. We'll place it right up here. We will pick the Commerce Tools integration, and we'll call it product link. And we will save and close the data. So I can now go here, click on my handy edit button so I can easily find my content. Just for context, we actually also have global search built into the platform. So I could search for the content from anywhere. It'll actually find all the different languages and the translations I have of the data. But I can go right into that page where I am. And so you can see now there's this new field that appeared that wasn't here before. And of course, there's no product link selected. So I can come in here, search for the product I need, pare these down and save the change. So behind the scenes, the page is automatically refreshing. If I come in now, I can see $68 paired in, and I can add the item to my cart and see that it was added in right over here. So really, really quick integration connecting Commerce Tools to Content Stack, allowing me to pair the data. And the way this integration works is we are not storing down this price info. This is being pulled dynamically from Commerce Tools through their API and delivered on the website. So if someone were to go in and change the price or add a promotion in my region, all of that would automatically flow without Content Stack needing to update any of the information.
Great.
Just to build on that, Gal, it really applies to any of the technologies. It's not just Commerce Tools, which is a really hot commerce platform, but it could be anything. So any API first system can be really easily integrated into Content Stack. Let's say you're a big enterprise and you've got 50 markets of content, you need to translate that, and you can really easily make an integration with translations.com, Smartly or something like that in a really similar way, and have your content translated actually in the CMS by that translation provider. So it just really saves that traditional workflow of exporting things to Excel, people reviewing it manually. And then if you want to change that in the future, then you can just change that part of the system. I think that's the real power of Content Stack and its architecture.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Martin. And from my experience, when I worked at Disney, we did an enormous e-commerce project, and it was 18 months with more engineers than you could count from multiple departments. And I literally just watched Gal do this and do what we were doing at the time in under 3 minutes in what took like 18 months. And that's just a crazy progress of technology that I don't know why I wouldn't want to utilize for my business to stay competitive.
Christy. I'm going to pose a question to the guys on the panel, but before I do that, we're going to do a Q&A after this section. So if anybody does have any questions from what they've heard so far, please do drop them in the chat, and obviously we will try and get to them before we finish the session today. But thinking about all of your own experiences on the Headless journey from all of the different angles that you operate in, and based on what we've talked about today and obviously what Gal's just shown there, I wanted to ask you all a question. There are people on here who are at that tipping point of thinking about Headless. There are people who are just exploring Headless for the first time. So what key piece of advice would you give to those people about making that decision to help them decide whether Headless is the right thing for them? And Gal, you're on a bit of a roll from a talking point of view, so how about you go first?
Sure. So what I would ask really is to ask yourself, do you have the next 4 or more years mapped out for your project? Like, do you know today exactly what you'll be doing for the next 4 years? I think most CMS projects, people pick a CMS, plan on running it for 2 or 3 years. What I've seen, at least from my experiences, ends up being run for at least 4 or 5, because that decision 3 years from now takes a lot longer. And I'm guessing that you probably don't know what you're going to be doing for the next 4 years. And I think 2020 has taught all of us that no matter how far in advance or how great we are at planning, things can happen that we didn't expect. You need to be agile and nimble and be able to innovate around it. And that's really what the advantage of a headless CMS is. With a lot of the traditional platforms out there, the first step is to build a blueprint and decide what you'll be building and how you'll be integrating. So if you think you're going to be growing in 3 languages with 2 integrations in, and then 6 months into the project or 2 months after launch, you realize you need to build in 4 new integrations or 2 new sections, or add translation if you had forgone it in the middle, it's just not possible to do. You have to really start over with your project. With Content Stack, you saw today how easy it is to build in a commerce integration. Everything I showed you today was actually built in less than a week, and I only showed you about 15 or 20% of what the demo actually entails. So a lot can be built really quickly into the CMS, and that's the flexibility that Headless CMS is out there, is it gives you the flexibility to innovate with your business.
Thanks, Gal. Martin, what's your response?
Yeah, so I'd say, you similar sort of thing really to Gal, but you're scaling. Users are demanding more and more. You're going through a lot of business change. I think we've all seen that this year. But I think you've got a large proportion of your lead generation functionality, or your revenue generating features tightly bound in with your CMS and digital experience platform in conjunction with that change that you're going through. And you'll see that that's when releases start taking weeks. There's a big backlog. IT are pushing back because there's loads of technical debt. I'd say this is a great time to go, actually, let's stop this. Let's go and look at, there's a better way. Let's go and actually evaluate the Headless approach and see if it can be right for us. I think one of the beauties of Headless in general is you can actually prove the benefits of it in parallel to that incumbent platform, virtually zero cost relative to like buying and procuring a huge platform, DXP, for example, and you can just prove that business case out. So you could actually just create a thin vertical slice of end-to-end functionality. So from your content production team, editors, translations, all that kind of stuff, and actually A/B it and go, actually, is it going to be faster? Are we going to see the benefits? And I think 9 times out of 10, or probably more, that will write the business case for you, just seeing that. So I'd say that would be the when you should really start to consider it.
Thanks, Martin. And then last but not least, Christy, what's your thought?
Thank you for picking me last, because I needed to narrow down all of my reasons, because there are so many reasons to choose a Headless CMS. But I can give 3 use cases that basically apply to every single company out there. One is, how often have you been searching for a piece of content throughout the entire company and you don't know who has it on their Google Drive or their SharePoint, or somewhere in one of the many dams that you've stored stuff in, right? You can, instead of having it sprawled out, you have one source of truth. You store all your content in one single place where multiple divisions of your company can access it and utilize it. And then 2, how about reusing that content on multiple channels? You don't have to then create, so many different pieces, distribute them out to your different divisions, right? Your social assets and your web assets and your mobile assets and, Google AMP and whatever channels you're using, right? You have them all ready to go in Content Stack in one single source, right? And then 3rd, I keep beating this drum about acquisition and distribution channels. It's so difficult to set these up. Why not make it easier for yourself and explore different ways of acquiring users and distributing to different users and see what works in a cheap, effective manner? I mean, every digital company has these 3 problems right now, and Headless is built exactly to solve these for you in the way that you want to solve them.
Great, thanks, Christy. Well, thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences and thoughts so far. Kind of going to go to the virtual floor, if you like, and see what questions we've been asked. So if you give me 2 seconds, I'll take a look at what we've got and then work out who is best to answer what. Right, okay. First question. How can you ensure buy-in so as to make a successful move to Headless? I'm guessing that's organisational buy-in, so maybe Christy and Martin, that might be one for you 2 to tackle.
I can start. So I think the best way to get buy-in is to show and not talk about it. And I just mentioned it in my previous answer, but you can so easily create that vertical slice. You can get an account set up within minutes on this platform, and then just really A/B it and go. The chances are, once you show sort of benefits, that's all the buy-in that you're going to really need to prove to the teams that are interested in it. I definitely wouldn't go down the long documentation cycle. I know some firms sort of mandate this, but the quicker you can get actual working software in the hands of the people using it, and it doesn't have to be super complex, then I think that's the best way to get that internal push towards moving to a headless platform.
No, thanks,
Yeah,
Martin.
I think Martin's totally right there. Also for me, what I really did was my team and I went in to understand the problems of the different departments and really what their pain points were. And then we looked specifically at how a headless CMS could solve those. Because when you're solving problems for people, they really want you to succeed in solving them. And so that's where you get that buy-in. And so that's really how we did it. But also, like I said before, I'm really lucky. I have an incredible executive team that trusted me in doing this too. So, but for others who have to work through a really large organization, really understanding what your internal users are going through is so incredibly important. So understand that, understand what problems you're solving for, and then go and do what Martin says and show and demonstrate what can be done in the power of this.
Thanks, Christy. You've mentioned Mac when discussing content stack and headless CMS. What is it and why is it important for headless? Gal or Martin probably on that one, I would say.
Yeah, I can take that one. So MACH is one of my favorite acronyms. It stands for Microservices, API First, Cloud, and Headless. And it's a term that we coined with a couple of our partners, and we actually just started the MACH Alliance, which opened up this summer. It's an open nonprofit really designed to promote just better computing and software. And the reason why it's important, both as who you're picking for your CMS, but really what you're picking for every technology out there, is that companies and platforms that subscribe to this way of development really are designed for the future. So a microservices approach to your application development within your system provider actually means that they can scale in any way they need to. So for example, we all went through Black Friday, we're in the holiday season. Anyone who works in anything related to commerce or retail is like on a watch for everything to make sure it's phenomenal and good. And for content stack, what that means is if we have a portion of our application spiking because of user activity or customer activity, we can scale those servers or those specific APIs without needing to scale or bring down our entire platform to make that upgrade. So for example, we put 210 upgrades to our platform in 2019. They were all with zero downtime. We actually haven't had any scheduled downtime on our platform in over 3.5 years, and have continued to release major features every week and a half. And so what I recommend for anyone doing as they're looking for software is go to the MACH Alliance, look at the kinds of things they ask, and they actually have a really good, it's like a 30-question questionnaire that you can ask any solution provider you're looking at to really understand, are they MACH? Are they the right technology for me to pick to make sure that I'm set for where I want my business to be 5 years from now, so you don't have to be back at the drawing board looking for technology again.
Thanks, Gal. Okay, we've had 2 questions in that are kind of along the same vein. One of them, why you wouldn't want to have a headless CMS, so some of the negatives. And then the other one, slightly from an alternative side, is the advantage of using headless rather than a traditional CMS. So kind of 2 sides of the same coin, but maybe let's tackle the why you wouldn't go headless in the first instance, which is a good question.
Yeah, I'll take this. I do get this question sometimes. So I'm pretty good at answering it. And my normal response is like, what project or what can you come up with that headless isn't good for? And I honestly think that for almost all projects out there, headless is the way to go. And I'm going to answer the second question first of why you would take headless to explain why. The biggest advantage of headless CMS is that you control every piece of the technology and the delivery and the experience for your customers. So you decide every single integration you're going to build, every framework. Are you using React? Are you using Vue? Are you using Gatsby? All of those decisions you make, and you actually build every line of code for your front end from scratch. So you're not picking a template or a development environment from some other provider and fitting what you want into it. So if you want to have your pause time on a carousel be 23 seconds for the first 2 slides and 37 seconds for the third slide, that is 100% in your control. And it's something that you can have your developers build. You could even give a text field inside your CMS for pause time, and it could default to 30 seconds unless something's filled in and override that. Those are things that can be built probably in less than 30 minutes as part of your development experience. It's very easy to do. The flip side with a traditional CMS is a lot of those things are dictated for you. So you're working within someone else's framework based on the decisions and the expectations they've given you, which is great because they take care of a lot of things for you. So you are building less, but you also lose a lot of control. And so that's really sort of where the balance is, where it seems like you get a lot of pieces built out for you. So you don't need to build a sitemap. You don't need to build navigation. But on the flip side, you can't really change the sitemap or the navigation beyond the areas where they want you to. And what we've seen in large enterprises is their needs are often very unique. And if you're a CMO of a billion-dollar company or multi-billion-dollar company, you want to have your menu navigation on your website be exactly the way you want it to be. You don't want to have limitations dictated by someone else, and that's reasonable. And that's where Headless CMS is perfect. On the flip side, when is Headless CMS not the right solution? I think it's when you don't have development resources or you don't have the budget to work with developers. Because ultimately for Headless CMS, because that template and that experience isn't provided, it needs to come from either an agency or it needs to come from your in-house developers. And so if you don't have in-house developers and don't have the budget to sort of work continuously with an agency or an implementation partner, because say a year from now, you want to add 3 new sections to your website, those will need to be developed. They'll be much faster to develop them with a Headless CMS and a traditional CMS, but they will need to be developed. And so if you are a smaller team without that experience using something like WordPress or Drupal, they have hundreds of modules that you can pull in and you can sort of take out of the box experiences that are created by someone else and drop them in. And the reason why that's great if you don't have an engineering team is because you can be a little bit more independent. The downside is this, and this is why a lot of companies are moving off of tools like WordPress and Drupal to Content Stack, is that you again are subject to what those plugins and what those modules offer you. And so you don't have more flexibility than what they can provide. So if you are okay with having a website that's sort of good enough and the main point is to get the content there, but you're not starting from a design that you need to have a pixel perfect layout, that's going to be good enough. But if you're going to spend $3 million on your website and hire 7 developers or 10 developers in-house, have a content team of 20 and have all these campaigns around it, you want to get that pixel perfect design, and that's really where you'll move to Headless.
Thanks, Carl. Probably got time for a couple more questions, and I think one of these questions falls off a little bit of the conversation you just talked about there. Somebody has asked, how do you measure the cost effectiveness of a CMS? So obviously that will come into decision making as to whether it's headless or traditional and so on and so forth. So I think, Martin, this might be a good one for you, given your experience of working across a kind of whole portfolio of CMS and DXP. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's a good one. So let's break it down. So you've got the first, let's say you're starting from scratch, stand-up costs. So you've got like the licensing costs, implementation, so initial stand-up, the infrastructure that may go with that. And you've got into BAU. So it's not just kind of the infrastructure that, the things that you need to keep the lights on. It's like how quickly editorial teams can get that content to market, and the DevOps and support effort, which is dedicated to keeping those guys supported. There's the opportunity costs that are incurred from the upgrade cycles, especially if it's a monolithic platform. Some interesting indirect costs. So I mentioned earlier the kind of the sustainability, the footprint of that as well. So what is your carbon footprint for running this platform, again, especially if it's a monolith? Developer retention as well. So what we find is developers typically want to work with cool platforms, API platforms, as Gal mentioned, sort of Mac principles. We find that focusing somebody really specifically on a platform, and that's their job for the rest of the days, isn't great for retention. So you kind of have to deal with that, which can result in recruitment costs and all that kind of churn, which knowledge dissipates, which is a cost to the business. It might not be a direct one, but it is there. And then you've got like the big one, which is that specifically for a monolithic platform, you've got that overhead, the cost to implement the monolithic CMS. So you've got your key functions, and then you've got to implement those within that specific framework. So you're going to need subject matter experts to do that. Typically, the proprietary platforms, quite closed, so they'll have like a community which is, it's not global. You have to sign up for it. Very specific technology implementation to do certain things. There might be training costs required. None of that with Content Stack. All you really need to know is APIs and navigating a fairly straightforward modeling tool to create your content models. So that's the beauty of it. You get that full flexibility of having quite kind of commoditized resources in the market, so you can sort of build that out anywhere. And then finally, I'd say sort of beyond the kind of lifespan of the CMS, with a monolith, you're in that kind of enterprise decay destruction cycle. At the end of the life, you've thrown everything in the bin and rebuilding everything from scratch. With a headless approach, you avoid that kind of sort of end of life completely, and you've got that continual evolution. So you'll never get to that point where you need to throw away the whole stack just to rebuild the same experience onto a different platform, technology for technology's sake. So I think those are the costs that we typically see. People typically ignore, miss those when they're doing a total cost of ownership calculation. And what we find is, headless, if you consider it over a longer period of time, is much more competitive in that overall TCO.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, last question. So, my current team is built around WordPress with writers and web editors with limited experience. We don't even have a web designer and everything is within our template. What sort of preparation can we make to make the transition smoother? Christy, you mentioned WordPress before, I think, so this might be one to head to you.
Sure. Yeah. So, Spencer, I am going to give you the classic product manager answer, which is, why are you moving off of WordPress and moving on to Headless CMS? So why is not to challenge you to be like, oh, you shouldn't do Headless. It is literally so that you understand what you're doing. You want to be able to explain what's important to you, so that you can make that list and say, hey, these are all the things that my team needs to do in order to support the business. And this is what we need in our new CMS. So that is probably the biggest thing that you can do to prepare to make a smoother transition, is understand why you're doing it so that you can explain your needs to the development team. Now, the second part is, when you say that you don't have a web designer, that's a huge red flag. And going back to what Gal said earlier, you really need a web designer. You need a UX designer who is just ambitious and creative and really wants to push a headless CMS as far as it can go design-wise. Because from experience, it's fun. I have that designer. She's amazing. You should look for someone like her, but don't take her. She's mine. But you really do need that web designer to work with you. And I really do hope that you have a product manager to help you. And I hope that you have a dev team to help you. And that list of why you're doing it and that needs will help you get those, the things that you need from them, and help them better understand that. And it'll help you understand what you're doing as well and your vision going forward. So hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Christy.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add on top of what Christy just shared. So one area where Content Stack really excels in, and this comes from sort of our history as a company, is working with our customers and really helping you reach your goals. We don't see success as making a CMS available to you and being up 24 hours a day. Like, that's great, but if you can't succeed with the CMS, we've ultimately failed you. So what we do is we actually require all of our customers go through architectural training after they sign with Content Stack. And the goal of that is not, hey, here's how you make an API call from Content Stack to pull content, or here's how you build a content model, because that's very easy to do. You'll figure that out in an hour or two after being on the platform. But really the heart of that is sort of teaching 3 teams within the customer to work together, because there's the design team, the content team, and the engineering team. And sort of it's a triangle between the 3. And many companies, what we find the way they work is content team will come to engineering with questions or a requirement or a feature. The engineering team will go build it, work with design to build it. Content team will approve the design. And then the first time the content team ever works with the content model and works with the project is when it launches. Sometimes even after it launches, they then find out how to edit the content there and correct all the mistakes they need to get up. And what we teach is how to really have it be a circular process. So in the requirement phase, what Christy was just describing, we teach the engineering team how to ask the right questions of the content team to understand assumptions like I showed you earlier, where this text should always be capitalized. That can just be baked into the template rather than instructed to a content user, because that'll remove user error. But at the same time, maybe that's how the designs are, but the content team wants to be able to turn it on and off. So it should be a checkbox. The default's to on, but you can turn off for just in case. Those are things that the engineering team won't know about and shouldn't need to think about. And so we teach the team how to really work together as a team to actually innovate on it. And that's really one of the areas where we've seen a lot of success for our customers.
Great, thanks, Gal. And thanks to all the questions that have been asked so far. I think there's some really good ones in there that really got the team to think. And that's it. So thank you to everybody for joining us today. And obviously thank you to Christy, Martin and Gal for sharing your insight and experiences. The team have been crafting quickly in the background to list the 3 pointers that we think you should be considering if you are thinking of that move to headless and why it's of benefit. Really hope they give you food for thought.